All right. So, welcome, Francesca. Thank you
Hi,
so much for joining me. I'm
it's so nice to be here.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to just introduce you to those people who are watching. We have people that are joining us live, and we have people who are going to be watching this back afterwards. But Francesca, you did our breath coach training, and
Hmm.
you work in schools. So I wanted to speak to you particularly because I know that you're using a bunch of tools, but particularly now the breath practices that you learned on the course to support your students and your staff as well. And I think a lot of people will be really interested in how you translate those practices into a school setting and to people who I'm guessing a lot of people have never done any breath practices before or considered the breath. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm head of wellbeing at my school, and that kind of came out of the fact that I decided to train as a children's yoga teacher about over 5 years ago now, and I kind of started doing a few sort of like yoga classes with the children, offering a few sort of like basic things for staff, and I sort of saw how much that was helping the kids, and that the staff were really open to it as well. And I think that from my own experience, just kind of like rewinding a little bit, I really suffered with really bad depression and anxiety when I was younger, in my teenage years and early 20s, and yoga in particular, coming to pranayama through that, really helped me a lot. They were really tangible skills that I thought would be effective for other people to learn as well. So when I sort of started thinking about how to support kind of children's mental health in schools and things, it kind of was a bit of a no-brainer for me, to apply some of those principles. And but what I was finding was that, so I completed a full pranayama teacher training, but I think that some of the more kind of like philosophical principles of it, and kind of the end goal isn't necessarily something that is translatable to people
Yeah,
who haven't done breathwork practices before.
yeah,
And I'm really aware of, one, kind of the connotations of wellness, well-being, meditation and things, to a community of people who aren't really in that, and to anyone really at the moment. And a lot of the training that I give in school is actually sort of like dispelling that well-being is about baseline resilience, and the tools that you have in order that we don't actually have to put the plasters on. They kind of help children and adults to be able to kind of do that for themselves. So I've already been looking, before I did the breathwork training, the breath coach course. I'd already kind of been looking at how to make things accessible, how to explain things so that they don't sound like woo woo or too zen to kind of like even like factor on anyone's radar who's really stressed out and frazzled and actually just like wants more time on their timetable to do stuff. And I didn't want to talk down to people. And I think that going on the breath coach course for me was very much about that, about, I really related to what you guys were saying, and how you were teaching and presenting things. And I thought, like, yeah, this could be a way of kind of taking the traditional stuff and sort of looking at it in a way that like you can see really tangible outcomes to stuff, and you have the words and the vocabulary to be able to show
yeah.
that to people.
So what's your kind of go-to kind of in to kind of get students and staff to kind of be on board, giving it a go? You know, you've said some really nice things about explaining that it's a tool so you don't have to put the plasters on afterwards, and it gives you resilience. You know, do you have any kind of have you what's your kind of like your main go-to if you're like this person's in a bit of resistance, like whether they're a staff member or a pupil?
So I think with like the actual breath work, with staff, I will literally just introduce it by getting them to take 3 deep breaths. And it's amazing how after just like those first 3, you can just be like, so how do you feel? And they're like, oh, this is like, don't think like they realize that one, they don't really take a pause to breathe. And also that literally like hacking the breath like that and just taking 3 is such a powerful thing. Sighing is a really great one with staff as well. Letting go a big sigh. That again, just like they those are really, again, I use the word tangible a lot, but I think that that's a really important kind of buzzword really. But actually they can feel the immediate release and the settling from those things. With children, they love, and which I go into as staff as well, but like balloon belly breathing. So we'll start off by, we imagine our balloon and that it's going to grow. And so I sort of introduce it with a visualization, because colors and imagery are really important with kids. So we imagine our balloon swelling and then getting smaller, and we imagine it getting brighter and then like fading in color, and then you translate that into their tummies, into their bellies, and they love that. And like that then kind of gets them to not just, if you just say, oh, listen to your breath, focus on your breathing, or even worse, close your eyes, like they're not going to do that. So so getting them to imagine a balloon and then having that in their belly, and they're sold basically. So so there's that kind of element in terms of actually making the breath practices from the off as something that's accessible. And then in terms of explaining it, usually with staff, I'll look at kind of like what are the qualities that we want to be presenting as staff, and what are the ones that we want to see transferred to our children. And then from that, we kind of tease out, well, if it's sort of like time management, feeling calmer, able to manage things, able to think clearly, those kinds of things, then we look at how that could relate to actually just taking time for ourselves to breathe. I get them to notice their breath, so like how are they breathing, and immediately they'll realize that they're chest breathers, and then that's kind of a revelation. So I get a little bit sciencey with it with staff, because I think that the more kind of like slightly hard-nosed and technical you are sometimes, the more that suddenly they wake up, and you've got science teachers you're talking to, you've got sort of deputy heads and things, you've got the more kind of creative people that maybe are just like on board with the idea of breathing. But you've got to kind of think about how you're gonna like target different demographics of people. And keeping things snappy as well, I think. So not kind of like getting them to sit there for half an hour doing something. You get them to take 5 minutes and building it up from there. And the same with children. Like their attention span is like 2 minutes. So you work with that.
So it sounds like you've really got the skills to and the talent to be able, what result you want to get from these, with these practices, as in like calmer or, like more grounded. But you seem like you can naturally tailor the way you introduce that so that you get those results, even though they don't necessarily, are conscious of that, the way that you're making it more relatable to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think giving a lot of so for example, if I'm teaching a class outside of school to people who are already on board and want to come, we can run for like 40-45 minutes. We'll sometimes do like a sharing circle at the end. I'll get more into kind of like sort of energetic principles and things, manifestation, things like that. And I don't use any of those words in school, and I wouldn't run it for that long. We would focus on sometimes, sort of affirmations, so some kind of positive affirmations, and with the children, I do a lot of stuff about gratitude. So there's elements that are like a crossing over, but it's using a different vocabulary for it. And I think that that's really important, that we don't just see, and sort of what we've chatted about before, this idea that actually breath practices, yoga as well, it needs to jump across as well. I think we can kind of put it on a bit of a pedestal, and actually we need to kind of see that this could be helpful for a lot of people. They might not practice it for the same reasons that we do, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be accessible for them. And I think we're seeing that more and more, the NHS using breath practices in hospitals with COVID patients at the moment. Like, yeah, again, no brainer, but like, I think that that's done a lot in terms of better publicity for actually the real benefits of this, and people are starting to kind of sit up and pay attention to it. I think that also kind of like things like children's yoga, mindfulness and stuff are becoming more prevalent in schools. I'm really lucky that I'm in a school that has kind of like given me, the space to be able to do that. Funding is obviously a real problem in other schools, and something that I'm kind of looking to do is, how do we kind of get that to the kids that really need it? The kind of long-term thing. But as you were saying, like, the problem really is still buy-in, and dispelling the kind of mythicism to do with yoga, to do with breathing. And I think there's still the kind of jokes about, Fran's like, Fran's queen of breathing, like head of breathing and stuff. And like, but it's more kind of playful now. I think at the beginning it was very much like, oh, go jump on your yoga mat kind of thing, and now it's like, oh, actually, like, can we have another breathing video? And I think that's really important as well. There's the fact that yoga is something that in a school setting isn't necessarily translatable online, whilst breath practices are very, very translatable online, I think.
More about that. So you're in the UK, for those people who are watching outside the UK. At the moment, the UK have just gone into another lockdown, and obviously you've just come off a year of on and off lockdown. So the schools have kind of been online and then in person. So how for you, how's it been translating some of the teachings online? And how have you kind of kept people's attention? And is this new for you as well?
This hasn't been too new. I mean, like, before lockdown, I was already doing kind of like recordings of some breath exercises for children, in case like form tutors wanted to use it in their form time, and that they didn't feel comfortable leading stuff. So so that was really helpful for them, and also in terms of like sharing content with both like the senior and the junior school and things. So that was actually, we were kind of like starting to do that. And then during the first lockdown, I sort of extended that, and I made a series of videos for the children. I also shared that content kind of online for people who were home educating. And they were sort of like quite homemade movies, but I think people really related to it, and it was really nice. I got a lot of like parent feedback that they'd been sitting with their kids and doing it. And it was kind of a bit of a revelation for me. I was like, oh, people are doing this of their own free will. It's not just me sitting in a classroom and telling the children they're going to do this. Actually, this is really helping people, and mothers in particular who were at home with young kids all day. I had a lot of really positive feedback with that. So then I kind of decided that, okay, I'll run some really short little live sessions with the children. So we worked out how to do that on Teams. And to start off with, they're a little bit giggly about it and things, but you keep doing it. I think repetition is key. So each time I see them, we do 3 things that you're grateful for, and they record their emotional weather, because it's really difficult to kind of say like, and this is really good for adults actually as well, because sometimes if you have a sharing circle or something and you're kind of like, oh, I feel like really sad, people don't necessarily want to do that, and children are the same, but they might draw like something like clouds and thunder or whatever, if it's a really like stormy day, or maybe a rainbow if there's been like, you know, bits and pieces, but on the whole positive, or fog. And so it's kind of like abstract, but we keep doing that. And the more that they do it, the more insightful they get with it. And they really look forward to it. And it's the same with the breath work as well, and the relaxation that I do. So it's all very visual. We kind of start off always with belly breathing, so they know what's coming, and then they kind of slot into it. So I think it's having like, yeah, that predictability with it as well, that they can kind of own it, and they can be like, yeah, this is my belly breathing. We're going to do, and then you can introduce other things like flying bird and mountain breathing, or picking fruit and stuff like that. Or we do things like, which is adapting stuff from the Breath Coach course as well. So, you know, combining some of the body opening, I think, is really important with it, because children don't just like to sit there. They want to move around a bit. So actually, like, encouraging a bit of wiggling is quite a good way of actually, you know, it also playing with posture and stuff like that. So it's about kind of how you feed it in, so that they're getting the benefits, but they're not really aware what it is that you're getting them to do. So yeah, it's kind of building on it. And it's the same with staff. So I started doing, with staff in a few different schools, doing just 20 minutes of a breath class, and kind of tailoring it to specific themes. So if I'm doing it midweek, I'll do a kind of breathing for balance. If it's at the end of the week, we'll do a kind of Friday wind down. Beginning of the week, a bit more of an energy boost kind of thing. So again, kind of making it accessible, so we're not saying we're going to sit here and meditate, and kind of switching it up a bit. So we do a lot of people actually just find it very difficult to breathe. So we tend to just really stick a lot with some Samavriti, introduce with the belly breathing, and then we might do 3-part breath, and then reverse 3-part breath. So really just getting them to think about expanding, but and trying to use the full capacity of their breath. And then we'll go into a relaxation. So not doing anything complicated, but just giving, it's more about holding space for people, I think, a lot of it, and you being a good space holder. And that's definitely something that you guys do really well on the course, of like how to balance your talk, and your rapport with people, and the positive reinforcement and encouragement, and not making people kind of really worried if they're breathing wrong. Because I can sometimes see kind of people sit down and they've just like had a load of classes or whatever, which is one of the difficult things actually with teaching online, because people will be jumping. So instead of, like, say you go to a yoga class or a pranayama class in person, you're walking there, you kind of already in the headspace. So you've got to have something that immediately drops people, because you can see that they're itching to kind of like get on a device or something. So that's actually why just the take 3 breaths is really just important. Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's kind of there's so many great things about the online element of stuff. Children at home tend to not be so, you know, distracted by people around them as well, so can actually be easier. But you've also got the you know, that there is also a lot of distraction as well, just by being at home for parents and things. So so yeah, it's about just getting people to drop and know that it's not going to go on forever. You've just got these 20 minutes, that's it. And then usually by the end of it, they'll be like, oh, I could have done that for longer. But it's just making them know that there are boundaries to it. This is just their time to focus on them, and then they can get up and get on with the rest of the day. And I think that's really important for teachers, and children are kind of quite similar. They need to know that it's not taking over their time. They can kind of put a toe in the water and then see the benefits of it.
So yeah, well, that leads me on to my next question, which is, what are some of the wins that you've seen, or like the feedback that you've had from the people that you've been teaching, that's kind of been like, yes.
I think so there was one class that I did when actually, so I was at home. It was one of those like weird hybrid moments where I was at home teaching and children were in the classroom. And I'd sort of asked for the screen to be tilted away a little bit during the end of the breath class so that they weren't kind of like trying to look up at the screen as well as hearing my voice. And then the GTA just turned the camera around, and these were like children that there are a lot of them that suffer with ADHD, if you have some other learning difficulties and things. And so they're usually kind of jumping up the walls pretty much. And she just turned the camera around, and all of them were just sat there with their hands on their bellies and their little eyes closed.
Oh,
Like just looking like they were in dreamland. And it was just like, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then they kind of like woke up and I was like, oh, how do you feel? And they're like, oh, that was nice. It's just so lovely. And then with staff, it's been really interesting to see that people come back. Actually, I think that's one of the biggest things that people like have said, can we have more of this? Can we come back? There was one member of staff from another school actually who was on the non-teaching staff, but she really was struggling with managing really shallow breathing, racing heart. And when she first started coming to my classes, she's like, I didn't realize this. Like, I had no idea. And then we kind of started chatting, and she told me that she had a lot of kind of gastrointestinal issues and things. And so from like her levels of stress, which were just so high, and she like really struggled to even like catch a breath, that was really kind of like transformational for her, really. And she's kind of written to me saying that she's using those practices and it's really helping her. So I think that was really nice, just in terms of like there being a journey and a realization there, just from having a little bit of space, really, to be able to do it. I think also the nice thing about breath work is that it's very democratic. And so you get people from, and schools are an interesting one because there's such a like diverse community of people in a school who are all integrally important. And I guess in society at the moment, we're realizing how important a lot of people who aren't necessarily valued for their jobs are, definitely. And I always offer a class to the whole community, to the whole teaching, support, cleaning, secretaries, whatever your role is in the school. And it's really interesting to see, like, you know, I'll have a headmaster and then the person who cleans the headmaster's office like in the same class. And I just think it's this really lovely way of sharing, really. And I won't go into kind of like a big sharing circle during a school thing, but just so that people could maybe say like how they feel at the end of a class, or if they'd want to comment on anything or their experience of it. And it's just really nice to have that dialogue that actually we all have this thing in common, and what a powerful thing that is. And that can then sometimes lead to some more conversations afterwards about, you know, the more kind of detailed explanations of breath work and things. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see that. And I think that it's really changed the community at school, actually, at the principal school that I work at, as a teacher. There's been a real kind of shift in the way that we operate, and I've sort of been running the wellbeing stuff for 2 years now. But I think definitely with the introduction of the breath classes and things, like, I do feel that we're more of a like compassionate community, and which is really cool, actually. And it's amazing that vocabulary started to be used.
Wow, that's amazing. So what a ripple effect that just coming back to your breath, and obviously there's other modalities that you're using, but just using those anchors as a way of shifting a whole ecosystem and culture within a workplace and within education space. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I know that there's there's a lot in the news and stuff about sort of like compassionate politics, and approach to business and things. Love her or hate her, I went to a talk by Mary Portas a couple of years ago, and she was talking about the kind of like the structure of her company, and the fact that they all hot desk, there's no kind of hierarchy, it's a very sort of like listening culture where everyone's ideas are valued. And that's kind of like, as I've been doing the breath classes and things, like that has really hit home to me of how the two can be really linked. And I know that a lot of companies are sort of like engaging more in both energetic and kind of breathwork practices and things in offices, and offering it to staff in breaks and things, or yoga classes, or I don't know what else you can do. But I think it's a really, yeah, it's a really powerful way of kind of like of connecting people. And I think that that's really the baseline of creating that kind of management structure, really. So although I'm working in education, I can see, like, you know, for the people in your course, like working in other industries and things, it's a kind of similar, it's a similar thing, definitely. But I think that schools being the kind of like very institutional, we've got a lot more structures to kind of like break down a little bit. There's a lot of like quite old school thinking, shall we say.
Totally see that. It's fascinating. I absolutely love hearing all of this. And before we go, my next question is, what's next for you, and what would you like to see? Like, how would you like to use these tools next? Like, do you have a goal in mind, or is there something that you're working towards now that you've kind of seen the results of these tools as well?
I think sort of personally for me, I'm really enjoying the, you know, the stuff that I do outside of school as well is something that is kind of growing for me. And actually the kind of the gift of the pandemic, for want of a better expression, has been being able to connect with people all over the world, which you wouldn't necessarily do. I mean, like having this conversation now, and the manner in which you're offering the Breath Coach course. In terms of in-school stuff, I think kind of what I touched on at the beginning in terms of widening the sort of community of schools that I'm working with, and thinking about how to get this into schools where funding isn't so available for stuff like this, and where actually I think that you know, you can see this being so valuable, particularly in places where children really do struggle with emotional regulation, which then might lead to particular behavior patterns and things. And I think that's the places that this is really valuable. And likewise, where there's high staff turnover due to burnout as well, you kind of tend to see that the two go in tandem. And I think that when we come out of this, I think that, you know, there's going to be, I think it's kind of brought to the forefront really, that there are a lot of issues in schools with stress, with burnout, with anxiety, with attendance, and that is becoming more public, I guess, the struggles that schools are having. So I think for me, it's kind of thinking about how to start branching out with that a little bit more, and encouraging other teachers, and also, you know, other holistic practitioners to think about maybe getting involved in this really. I think definitely the more that people are talking about it, I was actually talking to this with another lady, Hannah Nichols, who did the Breath Coach course as well, and the fact that really the more people that are talking about it, the stronger that this becomes, like with yoga, and the fact that that is no longer something that a kind of a niche group of people do. It's like a very consistent thing and something that's not questioned. And introducing yoga to kids was not really such a radical, it was quite radical, but like not a massively radical thing. And hopefully as more people are talking about it and more schools are, like, breath work become sort of like new yoga.
Yeah.
You don't need a yoga mat or anything to be able to do breath work. So yeah, that's my sort of thing that I want to build it, really. So taking what I'm doing but making it more available. So school holidays are going to be busy, I think, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so cool. I mean, like, the work you're doing is so important, especially, teachers are who teach our kids, and kids are our future, so these tools are so important to give. And I wish I knew these skills. I share in the training, of my first sort of anything to do with the breath was through singing, and the byproduct of learning those, how to use my breath, was that I had a tool to be calm. But I didn't understand that until much later. And having, because it wasn't explained to me, or maybe even the singing teacher didn't really understand. Her only goal was to make me sing better, and or to be able to sing longer. And I wish I had those tools now. And I really hope that having a wellness practitioner, or head of wellness, becomes a really normal thing in schools, because we start seeing, and I think a lot of institutions, they need to see the hard facts in order to invest in something. And if you're already starting to show those like really tangible results, then hopefully that will have the snowball effect of people going, oh, okay, I want that result for my school, and that's the modality in which we can do it. Then great, let's open up that conversation. But it needs people like you who are like, over here, it's happening, it's happening and it's working over here, and you can do that as well. Let me show you how. And that just has such a ripple effect, which is so exciting.
Absolutely. And I think the main thing is actually sort of getting into schools and stuff, that I do like doing that initial presentation, where you're also showing, and you guys again do this really well, that you can bring your personality into it, and you can stand up and talk about it, and bring in a bit of the science, bring in the factual evidence of things, and make it kind of about the results, and show that actually you're sort of demystifying things a bit and are approachable. And I think that really gets the buy-in, and then you can kind of go into, okay, and this is how we're going to do it, and breath work is sort of part of that, and a really, really crucial part of a mindfulness program. Because I think the problem is, at the moment, there's also just there's so many resources out there for kind of, this is how you do mindfulness, and I don't think it's necessarily it hasn't really got the real kind of the real foundations and the proper skill set underneath it, and isn't really having the desired effect. Whilst I think we really need to kind of rethink that and kind of pare it back a bit, almost. Like I say, like, it's really good that kind of getting everyone talking about it, but getting people talking about it in the right way that is actually going to have an outcome for people, rather than it just being like, go and color in this worksheet kind of thing, and that being mindfulness. Like it's kind of unpicking a bit of good work that's maybe gone a little bit wrong.
It just comes back to, and you said this as well, and like Rachel and I are huge on this, is like, if people understand the knock-on effect that going the wrong way has, then they are much more invested in when they see the results, in incorporating a tool into their own toolkit and into their routine. And if they can't make it relevant to them, it's just another kind of intellectual thing that we should be doing, like, we should be eating 5 veg a day. But like, if you actually understand the impact it has when you don't do those things, and the positive impact when you do them, if you understand how it's relevant for you, not just some other person, but actually you, then you're more emotionally invested, and we make emotional decisions. We make decisions based on how we feel about stuff. it's particularly if you're not introduced to mindfulness, and you're not introduced to or understand that your emotions are not truly you, or maybe that your emotions need to calm down before you make a decision. And I think as well, like breath work and breath practices are like so tangible in the way that if you take 3 deep breaths into your belly, the breath work will do the work. It doesn't have to be that you are totally bought into the idea, and the results are in your own body, so you see it for yourself. And that's why it's so like accessible to so many people, is it really gets, you know, those thinking people who need to have the facts and the analyzing and the results, you know, they feel it in their body as well, which is going to mean that they then enlist their own emotional response and their emotional relationship with those practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, that's kind of the big takeaway of actually connecting people who, from like the industry that I work in, sort of like are very detached from their bodies in many ways because they're just all up here, getting them to reconnect with how they feel. And, you know, we teach about in PSHE and stuff about, you know, your warning signs in your body and stuff, but it's just not something that as adults in general, I think we're just not very good at practicing what we preach. And it's just so vital. And just as you say, giving people a tangible relationship with their bodies again. And yeah, it just does the work.
Amazing. Francesca, thank you so much. I've so looked forward to this conversation, and I've really enjoyed just hearing how these practices are having this effect. And I really am looking forward to seeing where you take this now. And it just brings me so much joy knowing that there are people like you making that difference in the places that really matter. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for the effect that you're having on other people. It's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely to talk. And if anyone like wants to ask me any questions or get in contact, you know, if they're interested in working in schools or whatever and want some pointers with that, because obviously there's different trainings for like, you know, working with kids and stuff. But also just like general questions about, you know, how to make stuff accessible and things, then I'm happy to answer. But thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. And we'll be in touch because I can't wait to continue following your journey.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.